What's up, nerds? Welcome back to Big Nerds Wargaming. And today I am going to talk about something I went to recently, which is a swap meet, miniature swap meet. If you've never been to one of those, you should definitely check them out. I don't know what they're called around the world, but around here in the States, we call them swap meets. And everybody gets together, usually in a public space, and they put up tables and they sell all the old miniature stuff that they don't want, but I do. So I found some really cool stuff. Starting off, I got some Adeptus Titanicus terrain for a little tiny city. So I've been trying to get into Legions Imperialis, so I'm hoping to use that as a Kickstarter to my terrain for that. I got some Warcry terrain tactical squad for my Blood Ravens project. I'll be making a video about that soon. A Reaver Battle Titan for Adeptus Titanicus, which I'm going to be using for Legions Imperialis. And I got some more Eldar Guardians, new in box, still shrink wrapped, so that's pretty sweet. Someone was selling a bunch of like the new drop pods, so I got a box of those discounted, so that's pretty cool too. For my Space Marine army. But the real reason I'm making this video is this little guy right here, this dirty bugger. This is an old Daemon Prince. And why are you getting a Daemon Prince? Some of you might be asking, Sam, you don't play Chaos? You're right, I don't play Chaos. I play against Chaos. I kill Chaos. But I got this for my friend, Ben, who does play Chaos. His birthday's coming up, and I want to do something a little different for his birthday. Usually we get each other a little something. Sometimes it's Warhammer related or records or whatever. But I wanted to get him a Daemon Prince. And because this was on, and I got this at the swap meet, it was like $15. I couldn't pass it up. Now it's the older Daemon Prince, not the cool new one that's got all the different heads and stuff. But I'm going to go through my bits and see what I have. Maybe I can customize a little bit. And he plays Thousand Suns at the moment. And I want to make it a little Thousand Suns, a little Tzeentch, change it that way. And another thing, he's kind of got a big backlog as it is as far as painting goes. So I'm going to paint this model for him so that he doesn't have to worry about it and he can just play it. So let's go see what I have in my bits bin. I don't really have a lot of Chaos stuff, but I might have some stuff. We'll see. And then I'm going to get to painting this sucker.
This model is looking pretty vanilla, so I wanted to try to find something in my bits box to spruce it up, and to make it look like a servant of the mysterious chaos god Tzeentch. I know some Tzeentch demons have almost bird-like qualities, so I found some feathers on my old Lizardman's standard bear totems, which I thought could be useful, and started clipping away. I also needed to repair some of the spiky bits on his back, so I figured I can repurpose some of these extra spear arm bits as well. I also found a really neat sprue I forgot I had, which is from Mantic's Kings of War, for a unit called Butchers from the Night Stalker's army. These bits are really awesome. Not only do they have deformed tentacle arms, but there are several creepy looking mouths that perhaps I can make use of. Maybe I can add an extra mouth somewhere on the Daemon Prince's body to showcase the horrific changes brought on by Tzeentch. I also decided to build a complete Butcher model because this will make an excellent proxy for a Chaos spawn. So Ben gets a bonus model too. With the bits clipped, I moved on to the tedious necessary job of cleaning off all the burrs and mold lines on the bits. This is something I often find is skipped on most second-hand models I buy, and it's really a shame because taking a few extra minutes to clean these pieces before assembly goes a long way in making sure your models look so much better on the tabletop. Taking some of my bits and some sticky poster tack, I try to find a good spot to put this gaping maw, because I decided it has to be used somewhere. Maybe here. No, not there. I did end up finding a perfect spot for it, his shoulder. The mouth is just about the right size, and with a little shaving and green stuff, I can make it fit in place. I then grabbed my glue and assembled up the Chaos Spawn model, and then began hacking away at his shoulder so I could fit the mouth in place. It was a bit of trial and error using my clippers and a hobby knife to take away more and more of the shoulder until the mouth fit more snug. It's best to be very conservative and work slowly when doing this so you don't take away too much of the model. That way you will have less blending and filling work to do with green stuff later on. Next, I mix up some green stuff and use it to fit the mouth in place on the shoulder. This is looking really good already. I use a silicone-tipped sculpting tool and a little bit of water to smooth out the bond between the pieces and make it look like part of the muscle tissue around the shoulder. Next, I take some of the spear tips and trim them down to repair the broken spikes on its back and glue them in place. Now it's time to do something with these feathers. I began clipping them off the lizardmen totems and looked for a good place to incorporate them. I think tucking them under the left shoulder pauldron might be a good place. I imagine his body is taking on some bird-like traits and growing feathers, but they are being crushed under his chaotic armor. Using some poster tack to see how they look, I began stuffing the feathers in place. Yeah, this looks like it could work out well. So I then take some green stuff and affix the bits in place and try to make the feathers nice and dense coming out from under the shoulder pauldron for full effect. I really like the way this is looking at the moment, so I move on to start the base next. I take some cork sheet and roughly cut enough to cover the base. I also want to make it look like the earth is cracking apart, so I cut away some of it with my hobby knife until I get a cracked pattern that I like. Next, I affix the cork to the base with some super glue, and then I add some sand to the top to add some more texture. And then again using some more super glue. You can use PVA glue for this too, but I wanted it to dry faster, so I use super glue instead. It was at this point where I really liked how it was looking, however there was something missing. If only I could get a different head for the model. I know that the Daemon Prince model has different head options, and one of them is a really twisted Tzeentch bird-like head, which would fit perfectly on this model. I then had an idea. I hit up every Chaos player I knew in the area asking for bits, and someone came to the rescue. Huge shout out to my buddy Chris, who had a few extra unassembled Daemon Prince models in his pile of shame. He said if I could build one up for him, I can keep all the extra bits as compensations. Sounds like a good deal to me. So to get all those sweet bits, I had to first build Chris his model as we agreed. So I started clipping away. Chris wanted this model for his Emperor's children, so I used those options for the head. I got to say, this model is super cool, and building this model makes me want to start a Chaos army of my own. Maybe one day. With Chris's model all assembled and out of the way, I harvested the remaining bits and got the Tzeentch head I was after. I clipped off the old head and it fit almost perfectly in place. I did end up doing a little bit of gap filling with some liquid green stuff and some scraping with the hobby knife so it would fit flush. I was very happy with the way it looked, and with that new head it looked complete. Next, I primed the model black to prep it for painting. So I really had no hard set plan here, so I start doing some experimenting. I know I want the skin to be blue, the armor to be red, and the metal trim to be a bright gold or almost chrome color. To lay the groundwork for the skin, I start with a dark purple base coat applied with an airbrush all over. Then I move on to the dark blue zenithal base coat applied with the airbrush to form a dark bluish purple tint all around, in which I can layer on the blues and build up the skin tones of the model. Once the base coat is all dry, I start with some vibrant blue tones on my wet palette and thin down some Thousand Suns blue to use as the primary blue tone. I then layer this blue all around the model over several thin coats while leaving the dark blue and purple in the recess areas in order to create a wide range of contrast. Normally, I tend to gravitate towards more muted colors, however I know Ben likes the look of more vibrant and bold colors, so with that in mind, I kept layering the Thousand Suns blue all around the skin. This blue is very bright and vibrant, which is an ideal color for a blue-skinned devil. Next, I take a rich dark blue and mix 50-50 with the Thousand Suns blue as well as a bit of Lamian medium, and I run that in all the deep folds and recesses on the muscles around the body. This will help blend the darker blue tones from the airbrush base coat into the primary blue tone on the skin. After that, I gradually mix in lighter blues and whites to lighten the shade and carefully apply thin glaze coats over the most raised and pronounced areas where the light would be catching the most. There really is no sure method here, as I'm figuring it out as I go. Well, I get the skin into a place where I am happy for now, so I decide to add some other elements. I decide to tackle the armor next, and start off by taking bright gold from Pro Acryl and apply several thin coats on one of the armor panels on his leg to test out the scheme. I've seen this technique before where you apply contrast paint over metallic undertone and it creates a really neat metallic color effect. So I decided to give it a try by adding Flesh Tear's Red contrast over a metal base coat. I use red for the armor because I know Ben wants to make his Thousand Sons army with red armor instead of the blue armor that you typically see in the box art. And I want this model to fit in with the rest of his force with ease. After applying the red contrast paint, I can tell this is going to look so great, so I go ahead and start painting the rest of the armor and metallic details with the bright gold metallic. Once that's all dry, I then add the red contrast paint over the areas that need it. Next, I take a smaller brush and touch up on some of the trim pieces on the armor with the bright gold, trying my best not to paint over the red. If I do end up doing a Chaos Army, I'm going to have to find a way to enjoy painting trim on the armor because it is both tedious and time consuming. Now that I have some more color on the model, I decided to push some of the contrast in some of the areas of the skin a bit further and gradually layer on lighter skin tones around the larger muscles areas and the head. The trickiest part about this is being patient for each layer to dry fully before adding more, also making sure consistency is just right. You don't want it to be too runny, otherwise it acts more like a wash. However, if it's too thick, the paint goes on too opaque and you lose the blended look that we're aiming for in the first place. Something I often do to make the details pop as well as hide the rough transitions between materials on a model is to do some targeted recess shading with Nuln Oil. This will add a nice ambient occlusion shade effect to the model and hide those rough transitions that you most often see between armor and trim or metal and flesh. Next, I introduce some complementary colors by adding some greens. I use a seafoam green or a teal shade for the feathers and the tendrils on his head. This shade of green has a blue hue and goes very well with the blue tones on the skin. I also decided to make the head even more pale because I want to add a recessed wash to the face and give it a subtle greenish blue. For this, I use Poxwalker and apply it to the feathers, tendrils, and the face of the model. After it dries, I do a light dry brush of the light skin tone over the face to pick out the raised areas and bring them back closer to the light blue color it was prior to the wash, while leaving the hues of the wash in the recesses of the face. Next, I layer on a turquoise green to the feathers and the tendrils to make them pop a bit more and make them a little bit more vibrant. Now it's time to work on the last few details on the model. For the talons, the spine, and the beaky mouth, I layer on Baylor Brown over several thin coats, followed by Ushati Bone. These are warm neutral colors that have a yellow or goldish tint to them, which contrasts well with the blue shades of the skin. Next, I take a dark silver like Leadbelcher and paint the spikes, the chains, and the Chaos Demon Engine tubes and cables on the arm. I then take a pure white and paint all the skulls and giant tusk on his pauldron. This is in preparation for the contrast paint Skeleton Horde. This color is perfect to use for skulls and anything else bone. After that, a touch of Nuln Oil and Targor Raid shade on the silver metallics, and the model is nearly complete. The only thing left to paint is this gaping maw and the tongue on the model. For that, I paint the inside of it with Screamer Pink and add some white for highlight. From here on, it's just final touches and details. I paint the eyes and add a little pink to the bumps on his head and highlight the gold with a lighter gold color, white gold. I also take some pure white and fill in the Chaos Star in his chest to give it a bright glowing effect. I then quickly paint up the base with some grays and blue energy effect, and the Daemon Prince is finished. Now let's take a closer look at the end result. Well, I definitely went a little out of my comfort zone with this model, but overall I'm very happy with how it turned out. I'm especially pleased with how I was able to make that boring Daemon Prince model more interesting with some gnarly spare bits. I normally don't do a ton of kit bashing, but this project was really fun, and I will be much more open to custom conversions in the future. Well, that's all for this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and Ben, if you're watching, I hope you like your new Daemon Prince. Happy birthday, brother. Well, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.